Hello and welcome
Yeah,
to Climbing on Mount Sophia. I'm joined today by Robin, Robin of the
yes.
Moment podcast. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for joining me today. So, Robin, I think you watched the video with DC Schindler and Jonathan Pageau on my video,
Yeah.
and we made a connection off of that because you wanted to talk a little bit about um, different aspects of symbolism and things that you have a lot of interest and
Yeah.
experience with. So maybe first tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
I mean, where to start? I guess. Well, I mean, I would say, yeah. I don't know. I'm just someone who's very much like a seeker of knowledge and wisdom, and just very much just yeah, just going down different paths and just exploring different avenues of thought. And based on that, I mean, I used to do that alone, but I've put together the podcast and this community of like-minded individuals who do the same thing. Like we come together and we have this shared, I guess Vervaeke would call it dialogos, where we have these conversations with each other in a respectful manner and try to find like the deeper truths
Yeah,
and
I was
to
I watched the I watched a couple of your videos, and I was watching
mhm.
the sort of introduction to your channel that you have last night as your
Yeah.
first little video there, and I love the symbolism even that you use for your channel. It's um
Hmm.
there's definitely many echoes of how I talk about climbing Mount Sophia and some of the ways I think about that in what you're talking about. So, yeah, wonderful.
Hmm.
Well, it's great. It's great to have you and get to chat. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. No, I just a friend happened to share the video, and then I was just like, man, this seems interesting because I had not heard about you before, but then I was like, okay, this seems interesting, and I was like, man, maybe I can bring something in from my unusual perspective
Perfect.
and see like what comes from it. But
Great. Let's
I'm
do
kind
it.
of but yeah, I'm kind of curious though, like what I guess similarities did you see like regarding your symbolism and what you noticed?
Um, well, what definitely the posture in which it's approached, a sort of questing in
Yeah.
regard to questions. You know that
Mm-hmm.
that a question is not something that is begging for an answer, that is even looking for an answer, but that the proper way to approach a question is to sort of follow it down and
Yeah.
find a sort of transformation in the following of a question. And so that was, yeah, I mean, I could talk about, the specific symbolism, I suppose, but really that kind of heart is what I've sort of got from watching some of your
Yeah.
videos.
Yeah, and it's very much the goal of that as well, like how we approach it. And I guess the core of that of like our approach is kind of based on this Proto-Indo-European Koryos pack idea
Yeah,
that
and I don't know very much about that, so I'm really excited to hear. I learned a little bit in a couple of your videos, but um, I'd love if you could sort of start with kind of telling me about what that is. Like what when you say Proto-Indo-European, tell me some of the context of that.
Okay, so Proto-Indo-European would be it's the hypothetical reconstructed base from which Indo-European culture came from.
Okay.
Um, it's based in the Neolithic. It stems in the Neolithic. It was very much the hunter-gatherer days of our ancestors, and there's particular rituals that have been put together through comparative research, looking at the different mythologies, different rituals, and they've been through anthropology and mythology, they've been putting this together. And I'm basing a lot of what I do on that research, and to, combined with Carl Jung's work, to tap into these, to use that as it's kind of like a mode for transformation. But I also look at like influences from different contexts as well, like Arthurian specifically, but also some Greek, some mystery school stuff, but also um, some Plato, some Neoplatonism there, and Buddhism and Taoism and different influences. But people really also bring their own influences into it. So it's kind of like an ever evolving thing. But it's kind of like, I suppose, the nature of trying to quest for the truth. It's like ever evolving. It's ever like shifting, and it's
Yeah.
never really, that exactly
So
fixed.
yeah. So it sounds like it's sort of the Proto-Indo-European refers to sort of like the ground out of which grows these various
Um,
maybe lineages.
Lineages, yeah, it's the different cultures that grew out of that. So it would be the Roman culture, but also the Celtic, the Germanic, the Greek, to name some examples. And
Yeah.
then specifically with like the Koryos, because the Koryos is this like warrior band
Okay.
that of young male warriors that would go out from the society into a liminal space where they would have to fend for themselves, learn self-reliance. And it's originally more based on the older hunter-gatherer like hunting rituals that were there,
Mm-hmm.
and those like echo through in different cultures. In the Greek, for instance, with Apollo, there's the Apollo as a wolf god that has these echoes through it, but also the Greek Corybantes, or even with the Romans with Mars or Quirinus, there's these rituals still there. And also through the Fianna from Celtic mythology, that it still echoes through in the Arthurian myth. And a lot of the base of that, like the core essence of it, which is for me really the most important thing, is this coming together of individuals to um, to allow each person to bring their full self and their strengths and weaknesses, and to find this balance between these, so we can balance each other out and form this cohesive group that has this shared vision. And what that shared vision is depends on the exact community, but I mean, for me, it would be truth. And
Okay. So I want to make sure I'm hearing you. So
mhm,
the Koryos is this archetypal kind of idea
yeah,
that is in this Proto-Indo-European soil, shall we say, and shows up
yes,
in different ways in the different lineages. But it basically comes down to a a formation of a symbolic unit,
yeah,
shall we say,
basically.
of individuals oriented toward a goal, which seems to have something like exploration of the chaotic unknown. And
Basically, yeah.
okay. And
And
for you, that's specifically properly oriented towards truth. Is that
yes,
right?
yeah. For me,
Okay.
it's truth, and to find out, like, I don't know, I guess like how a friend of mine would put it, it's kind of like to help each other to get out of Plato's cave. It's kind of the goal of the whole endeavor.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's yeah. Okay. So um tell me more about the choreos. Like,
Mhm.
what are the rituals like? What is it? Yeah. Tell me more about it.
Okay, so regarding the rituals, well, normally it would start off with young men or even boys, depending on the culture. Um, they would um later on, though, like, it used to be more communal, but later on it was more focused on just the elite young men that would be doing this. But yeah, so they would be going out on this hunting kind of like expedition, or would do this ritualistic battle where they would be going out for many years, or even in the original context, they would be basically this group of young men that were going out. They could not have any possessions. They had basically nothing but their the weapons and what they were wearing. They were not part of the society. They were basically in a liminal space where they were not part of really anything. They were just, well, the Koryos group that they were part of, and they were tasked with defending the community from outsiders, basically. And that was, in that context, the entire goal. And they identified with dogs or wolves. And the Koryos is also one of the it's the foundation for also the werewolf myth. So the werewolves, these shapeshifters, came out of the Koryos tradition originally.
Okay.
So there's been some folklore experts that have traced this back to this tradition. Also, like with Odin and like the Ulfhednar, like these wolf warriors, and even the bear warriors, it goes back to this older base and tradition, which goes further back even into the hunter-gatherer societies, where these hunters would be embodying this to tap into their own instincts and into the rage and the anger needed, like their survival instincts, basically, to be able to survive in the wild and to be successful in that sense
So
regarding that. But it would also serve at the same time as this rite of passage to break free from one's parents and society, so that one can re-enter it as an individual, basically, and to be able to they would go through this like death and rebirth ritual as well, where they would like dress up as their ancestors or like important figures, where or like different like deities, or it depends on the specific context and the culture, but they would dress up as something else. And in the ancient context, it would be mostly ancestors, so that symbolically they died, so that they could be rescued and be reborn. So they would become part of the collective, basically, of society. And that
so
was like a big part of it.
okay. So it's like a temporary thing that it was like a almost like an
Yeah.
initiation stage that you go through for a period of time.
Yeah, it normally would be, depending on the culture, 2 to 4 years, maybe even 7.
Okay. Okay. Oh wow, that's fascinating. So there's almost like a so this has nice, really good parallels to sort of the wandering in the desert, the wilderness,
Yeah.
obviously the death and rebirth. Um, but also like one of the things that's interesting
Mm-hmm.
is that like so I have a couple things that I'm interested in. One is the you talked about how they sort of get ostracized from the society almost. Like
Yeah.
they're recognized as other in a sense, but they're also
Yes.
protector of the same.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, have you thought about that and what's going on there for in those spaces? Because
If
typically,
I've
I guess my
Yeah.
question comes from the place of like, typically, at least in the modern culture, when a
Yeah.
young man feels ostracized from the culture, he tends to not want to defend it.
Um it
So
makes
I'm wondering
Yeah.
how that was accomplished, because that seems to be something that we don't have um near as good of a
Mm-hmm.
sense of, that you can actually be in a relationship where you're pushed away, but that actually maybe enhances your desire to come back, but also to preserve that which pushed you away.
Well, in the if we look at like the different cultures, it would not always be successful,
Mm.
because sometimes these young men would go off and found like they would start their own culture, like for instance Romulus did in his pack.
Okay, okay. Okay,
So
okay. Oh yeah, yeah,
it
yeah. Nice,
depends.
nice. Okay.
So it depends. they would sometimes come back, sometimes they would not. So it's not a guarantee. But they were tasked with defending. They were a big part of it also was that it was conceived back then as basically like a part of becoming a man, like you had to go through it to
Right,
become a
right,
man.
right, right. And there
And
was the sense
if you,
of
yeah,
there was a sense that, you know, maybe from the standpoint of, well, let's call it the mother culture, the hope was that you would return to continue to renew that,
yes,
maybe
basically,
that more feminine aspect. But there's also an acknowledgement, maybe, of the possibility that you may, in fact, never come back and go on to build some sort of habitable order in a new place.
yes, basically.
So that was that seen as necessarily like a negative thing, or was that sort of like an acknowledged, like, yeah, that's also a valid path for the Koryos to take to break off?
It's actually something that reoccurred. It's like from the Neolithic culture. It basically that's how it started to split off and start to conquer different areas and to basically, um, yeah, form these new different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's and the success of that was in this cohesive unit and like how they did this. But but there would always be ones that would come back. There
Mm.
was because in the end, we are social creatures. So in that sense, uh, there would be always ones that would come back, but then there's also definitely ones that would not. But they would basically create their own areas, and it kind of depends on what happened after on the specific context
Yeah.
of the culture. But there used to be at least the hope for path would be that they would come back and revitalize the culture and to bring something back from outside, because the very thing is that when one is in the culture and one would only stay in that, then one does not perceive that what could be updated. So if you go outside of it and you have to fend for yourself, you have to um, you are not no longer part of that, but but it's part of this ritual. But this
Yeah.
ritual and what they did, it was also most of the time guided by an elder
Mm.
who would be the guide for it as well. So
Okay.
the Koryos pack leader, even though like they could definitely leave and decide to leave if they wanted to, but
Yeah.
the the idea was that they would come back, and then once they would come back, it would be signified like, yeah, now symbolically the boy has died, now he's a man. He would be kind of like welcomed back as such, as now you're a man of the tribe.
Right.
And then after that, then there was this then there would be the marriage ceremony
Mm-hmm.
eventually,
Okay.
where the final goal would be for them to have a family, and it's symbolically symbolized as the surrendering of the sword to the wife, and and
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah.
it becomes different. But this surrender of the sword also kind of symbolized the kind of like a surrendering of like the freedom that they enjoyed when they were not part of society. So they become like it's so they kind of like pledge themselves to
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
only their wife, their future family, but also the tribe, so society as a whole.
Yeah. It's a sort of acknowledgement that
Yeah.
you've explored and you're done exploring, not totally, but in the sense that there's the possibility that you might not come back.
Mm-hmm.
So do you sort of? It sounds like, and if I'm sort of
Yeah.
reading between the lines here, but do you kind of feel yourself as being in that kind of space?
I have in my own way been like I guess, well, The thing actually is that I've actually did not decide consciously like to do it. It's just kind of like what happened, and then this like this kind of like motive or pattern kind of called out to me, and I
Sure.
decided to take it on this role, and I was just like, okay, so I realized like, well, this is kind of what it is, and that was calling out to me. So I've been very much working on that and overcoming through it like different things that kind of held me back from the past as well. Um, so what I noticed is from experience, because I've been like trying to reenact these rituals in my own way, that um, very much that I don't know, like it very much taps one into one more like instinctual side, more but in a controlled manner. And it's very much, I don't know, it changes you in a interesting manner. There's like this transformation that occurs where um, you don't feel like, I don't know, it's like before doing it, I definitely was kind of like more like a boy than a man, but now
Mm.
like it's there a shift occurred by doing that.
So in that sense, they are you found them to be legitimate rituals for you in the sense that you
For me, yes, I've been yeah, for me
and
very much so.
and if and what has that been like? Like, what have you noticed in terms of um sort of the more practical
Mm-hmm.
binding to reality of your life and interacting with society? Has that become more difficult or less difficult or
Um, well, it's changed for sure. It's different now than it has been. It's been it's funnily enough because of kind of like the patterns that I broke through. A lot of it actually stems from more like the childhood trauma kind of side of things, and to work through I don't know, like to tap into one's I guess like masculine inner power. That's one big part of these rituals. So that's kind of like really helped. So I could start to go out into the world with more confidence and more openly, and interact with people much better than I ever could.
hmm,
But there's this other side to it, because that what I've noticed is that some people tend to interact differently now with me, because there's something different about me that they have noticed. Um, I don't know, like some, I don't know. Some are intrigued, some are just like indifferent, and some have this like weird feeling like there's something like, I don't know, um, different about me. Like I have this like, I don't know, I guess presence or something that makes them. Their body language is very much like, oh, please don't hurt me. But I'm like, chill, like nothing is gonna happen.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
Yeah. So maybe it's like you it almost sounds like you have a sense of being a lot more of an individual, right? And a lot more of an
yeah,
of an actual self
yeah.
in a sense. That's amazing. That's wonderful. So, I guess I'll ask you: would you like to take this in a direction of, because on one hand, I'm curious to learn more about this sort of personally, but you had reached out to me because of um,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to possibly tie it to themes in Christian symbolism and things like that. So I'm opening it up to ask you which direction you'd like to go.
Regarding that, I mean, I think that from like a Christian perspective, from what I've seen, the best because these elements are very much also present within I don't know if you're familiar with like the hunting rituals by the nobles in the Middle Ages.
Hmm. To some degree, but probably not in a sort of rigorous way. In the kind of way that I've read books about,
Uh-huh.
um, more like novels of the Middle Ages. But say more.
Okay, so the there's still these elements of that, especially the ritualistic nature of the hunt, how they were doing it, because it wasn't about efficiency. It was about like these young, again, these young men and boys would go out there and do these, go through this specific ritual of the hunt, which was very specific. They would go through that, and through that. Also, again, this would be a matter of years. They would go and be prepared, and they would. It's kind of like they were in a way kind of also tapping into that particular mindset, because it's like a mindset shift that occurs when you go into this like this kind of like yeah, I guess hunter kind of like mindset, where you where just shifts. It's and I think that's a big part of it, that that kind of facilitates this this shift from the more like, I guess, like boyhood like kind of mindset versus like a more, I guess, masculine mindset, more like an adult mindset, where I don't know, there's these changes occurring
Yeah.
through that, by tapping into that, into more of like the controlled like primal hunter side. But also in like Arthurian myth, there's these Koryos elements as well, through like the Fianna from Celtic mythology, where these elements have also been incorporated.
Yeah. One of the things I think of is like I love the show Game of Thrones. Um at least for a while. I don't did you ever watch it?
For a bit, but not everything.
Sure, sure. Well, at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
there's some of these scenes where it very much kind of echoes with what you're saying, where there's this shift of, well, and there's also a famous line from the show to its main characters, kill the boy and let
Mm-hmm.
the man be born.
Yeah.
And it is, it's a much broader and more complex kind of situation, but it is sort of around this ability to dispense with um a
Mm-hmm.
sort of peace peace centered and pleasing of others centeredness toward a taking on of the onus and the capacity to be the one to make the call, to
Yeah.
to go out and make things happen with even a full recognition maybe of the fact that it's not necessarily going to be always the right thing, or it's not always going to be perfect, but you have to do you have to do your best, but you also have to kind of
Yeah.
you have to accept that you have to descend into the animalistic part of being you, right? Like you have to really go out, and there's a scene, I don't know if I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember where this is from, but I have this scene in my mind of like the boy taking the bite out of a freshly killed heart of an animal, of his first kill, as sort of a and I mean, that's in even the culture I grew up in, that's still a thing,
Mm-hmm.
where there's sort of a ritualistic, well, you have to eat that, you have to take a bite out of the heart, and there's not nearly the mythology around it anymore, but there are still vestiges of it alive.
Yeah. Very much so. And even in the I guess even in pop culture, there's like still like elements of it there, and like Lord of the Rings, for instance, the Fellowship is a good example of that, the motif, or even like with the Millennium Falcon and Star Wars with the crew, or these different. And I think the motif is still there. I do like personally see like that that there are groups of men out there that where this motif goes more into the realm of fantasy than more being embodied, and I think that's kind of where um, things can go wrong. But I do think like that motive is calling out to a lot of a lot of these men, but I feel it's more about finding this way how to embody this in like a healthy, constructive way to it's because the thing is the motive is there, and this like idea of the shared like purpose. It's just about what are we gonna put up there? What's the
Yeah.
purpose? What is the guiding? Because the structure itself is just the structure of the Koryos pack, but the structure itself does not necessarily dictate, well, what's the guiding principle of the pack? Like, what are we working towards? And I think
Yeah.
that's where, yeah,
Because in a sense, this is what your modern gangs are. Their goal is not they don't have any mythology to point them toward a goal aside
yeah,
from the mythology of modernity, which
yeah,
which orients them only towards power and wealth.
yeah.
Um. So when it comes to maybe for you personally, but also in
Mm-hmm.
sort of the roots of these of this
Yeah.
tradition, where did the where did the element of the aim come from?
The element of the aim.
Where to aim? How did the how did the directionality get determined? Like you come
Mm.
together and what do you do with it now? Like how was that worked out? Was it sort of relied upon? Did it rely upon the elders to sort of direct it? Did it?
It's from what I because it was one of the elders who would be leading the Koryos pack as the leader of the pack. So he would be one that already had gone through it before, would be leading it. So in that sense, there was an element of elders there, but a very big part of it is also the mythology, and it really depends per culture. But like with the Norse, for instance, you had Odin, for instance, and the Einherjar and the Berserkers, and they had their specific purpose embedded within their mythology, and the elders were just the guiding force regarding that with the mythology. But that element is an important factor in all of that.
So when it came to you and sort of working through, because I'm imagining, right, and just from
Yeah.
my own standpoint, like in the modern world, when you're trying to find your way out of the cave, when you're trying to orient towards some of these archetypal things, once you realize they're actually going on,
Yeah.
you know there's a haze. There's a haze that you kind of have to feel your way through. Um, maybe both to find what it's about, but also maybe even more so how do you orient that search, that quest?
I mean, for myself, it took a long while to, I guess, learn enough about the Koyos base to even like put that together before very much I was able to get the goal right. Even it's like looking through all the mythology, the research, the anthropological studies, and trying to find that out, and then I think what really like captured my attention right away, though, with it was very much like the Arthurian legends. So that was like a kind of like a guiding force regarding that for me. So it's kind of like that was kind of like beckoning as much as the Koyos pack was. And then like over time I started to through research figure out like, hey wait, like these elements align, and like, hey wait, the Fianna have been linked, and that's been, and so I started to figure out like how the different puzzle pieces started to fit together regarding that. But kind of like I guess the goal of what I have is kind of like been for a while kind of like the same shared goal of the Arthurian legend, the Holy Grail, the highest. So that's
Yeah.
kind of.
So maybe tell me about that a little bit. Like what do you see when you look at the Holy Grail in your modeling now? Like what comes up for you? What's evoked? Because I'm relatively like I know the Arthurian legends in a sort of like maybe elementary school level kind of way, but
Mm-hmm.
not deeply. So um I'm wanting to learn like
Well,
what's the Grail
uh-huh.
about?
What's the grill about? Well, if you look at and I think like Emma Jung's work regarding like Percival and the Holy Grail that I've looked into is very much relevant here. Because when you look at the Arthurian legend, very much the goal of that would be for because the Holy Grail in that way from a Christian lens would very much link to the Holy Spirit, and it's very much, but as much also like linked to the land. And it's kind of about bringing a kind of like the divine and the spiritual down onto the earth, and that's kind of the goal of regarding that with the Holy Grail. Even though in the story, Percival kind of like only stayed with the Holy Grail and then stayed there in the castle and did not come back. And that kind of like I don't know, Emma Jung pointed out like why the Arthurian enterprise like lost its way there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, because you can't like too heavenly minded to be any earthly good is a real problem. Like,
mm,
Plato insists or Socrates insists on the return back into the cave.
yeah,
And
and that's
this, this sort of fundamental idea, I would say the fundamental idea in Christianity, and this is an idea from Pageau,
mhm,
from Matthew Pageau's book especially, is that
yeah,
that it to be fully human is to be the meeting point of heaven and earth.
yeah, I would
and
say so.
and that I mean, one of my personal
Hmm.
recurring things is there was a time where when the spiritual started to open for me and I started to have
Yeah.
experiences and the ability to start to move beyond the sort of the level of earth, the temptation and still the emotional temptation is
Hmm.
to is that Gnostic pull of to go up there and stay up and
Yeah.
devil may care what happens with the rest. But of course, I'm very fortunate in that I'm married and now I have a daughter, and those things, and I've also had some tremendous teachers to kind of pull me back down, and so now I'm really interested in learning
Hmm.
how to be fully embodied, and maybe it's I want to say like stay with um the grail in a sense, but it's not a grasping thing. Like that's what I often try to do, is like try to hold on to it while I come down, and that doesn't work very well. It's more like you have to trust that that it will be there when you come down.
Yeah.
What has that been like for you?
Mm, how it's been like for me. I think for me very much it's actually it's these rituals that I do. I have this um I go into the woods with this particular staff that I have where I practice also martial arts with, and I do that in the woods, and I consciously put myself in this like I would say like hunter gatherer kind of mindset to like tap into that, and I kind of prefer to do it and it seems to work best when it's like in kind of this liminal space between day and night, so like in like the in like a dusk setting anyways. But it's when I'm there and I kind of like put myself into that like mindset where there are these moments where where one feels like one is fully alive, while at the same time it's like you're fully yourself, but also fully part of everything around oneself, and you kind of like there one with the world, like you feel like part of the same kind of breath. It's only like way how I can put it. And um I've been like really working on that, and well, next to like doing like practices like qigong from like Asia. But I really feel like that particular practice in the woods, for myself at least, have been very helpful in like keeping things more embodied and grounded. And I think I mean I do it very much like to like yeah, tap into like the more like Proto-Indo-European side of it. But from what I figured is that it's it's not as much about like the not even the mythology behind it, or like what you're specifically tapping into. It's more about the kind of like the act of going out into nature and practicing things such as martial arts, um, or tracking, or doing these kind of things to put you in this different frame of mind and actually try to um, kind of like embed yourself into that kind of mindset, which yeah, I know it snaps you out of the normal like mode of modernity, where one, we're thinking and we're in our heads a lot, and it kind of snaps you out of that, out of the more higher spheres, and it's kind of like snaps you right back into the here and the now. And um and and yeah, if you really like engage with it, that's kind of what I found, is then you start to go into this state of flow, because it's like, because that's really the goal. It's like you that you're present, you're doing something, you're holding something, in my case the staff, and you have a particular goal that you have of what you're doing, and then you can be fully engaged in that, while you're also, your body is engaged in it as well, because you're out in the woods, and you're engaged on many levels.
One of the things that so
Mm-hmm.
modernity grows out of Christianity, right? All of
Yeah.
modernity grows out of a Christian, especially sort of the totalitarian Christian aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and is a reaction to it in a sense, and pushes away from the world into this higher and higher.
Yeah.
The I just had a conversation with David Schindler again, talking more about modernity, and um, how
Yeah.
it's sort of it's symbolized by the astronaut, right? In the
Yeah.
in the in the complete detachment from reality. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe part of the reason that is that I think, when Christianity is at its finest is when it recognizes and preserves and even maybe glorifies practices from indigenous places. Like my like I
Mm-hmm.
know there's a church up in I have a family up in Edmonton, Canada, and one of
Yeah.
they're Catholic, and one of the cathedrals, is it a cathedral or a church? I'm not sure, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's they've worked with the Native Americans who are part of the congregation, and said, hey, how can we value and integrate these rituals and this wisdom of this tradition into these into this greater context of ideas that we're bringing to bear, and the notions of, well, Jesus and all this other stuff. Like how could we how
Yeah.
could we how could we properly bring that together? And as and so they have a church that looks very different than most Catholic churches, right? Like the altar is a big tree, right? And that's where they administer the sacraments from, and different things. Like they've tried to work this together. And so as far as I can tell, one
Mm-hmm.
of the one of the primary reasons Well, because it's one of my biggest difficulties with Christianity and why I remain somewhat in a liminal. I'm a very much in a liminal space in relation to
Yeah.
Christianity. I think because there is so little in terms of ritual that binds you into into embodiment in this way. And I can hear Christians in my head but saying, oh, but the taking of the bread and wine is the literal, it's the consumption of the literal flesh and blood of Jesus Christ. And there's all these ideas with that. And that's well and good, but it only is that to you insofar as you're able to abstractly really, like, you're able to get the symbolism of what's happening there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bind you into the earth. That binds you towards heaven. It doesn't bind you into, being in the woods with your staff. Like, you're not going to get an embodied flow state with that, and a sense of the value of, so we say, the lower level of the wildness of nature. Like, I don't see that in Christianity hardly at all, where there's a real acknowledgement and it's like like you only ever look up, and when you look down, it's always to try to like bring it up instead of trying to look down to see through the down, like see the glory of God in the wildness as much as in the order, maybe.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I don't know, like I don't know, from like, that's kind of like why what I love about the kind of like the Arthurian legends myself. It's kind of this understanding that of the two being brought together, so that you're trying to, instead of like going up and just going away from the world, we bring the divine down onto the world. And we bring it back down. So it's kind of like the embodiment of spirit into the world, instead
Yeah,
of this pushing away.
yeah, and like, you go up in order to come down, and you go down in order to come up, and you really find the depths of meaning and the depths of reality are disclosed to you in the going up and the coming down, and
Yeah.
it's in the being with yourself as those things are happening. It's not like, definitely there is meaning that reveals itself through those journeys, but the real, like, the real experience of being human is that you're going on the journeys
Yeah.
in some sense.
Yeah, it reminds me of what I don't know. I had read something about. I think it's from France. This I just remember that his name was Gaston, who said it's more about the ritual of the hunt and the process of the journey itself than actually the than actually the final goal of the hunt. It's the journey and the ritual that actually is the most important part of it. The transformation isn't that, not in what is actually achieved at the end.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's one important factor to
Yeah.
understand in that.
And I think that the word that comes to me there is this idea from Schindler, which is mythology. That mythology, which is sort of the hallmark of modernity, and maybe the hallmark of the diabolical in general, is that it turns the goal of every action into the result. And it doesn't really matter so much what the process is, as long as the result happens. And maybe one of the deepest ways of thinking about that is that the man who disdains and hates evil, and the man who loves good, may do the exact same thing in actuality. They may take the same action, but what they are doing and how it will play out long term is completely opposite.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, some of this reminds me of like some of the reading I had done. This one Jungian deaf psychologist that went into was it Hephaestus? I think it was Hephaestus, the myth, the creator of about the myth of the creator of the maker, where she went into this like idea of mythos, where she pointed out, which was very interesting to me, that things before, things went weird in, like, for instance, the Industrial Revolution. Things used to be about things just used to be about the process. It was the intimate relationship between the artist and that what's being created. It's between and it's kind of like it happened everywhere, because there was no machines to make anything. It was the interaction between the human and the object, that what was being created. And hence it became about both the process, but also about the quality instead of the quantity. And it didn't go into those weird spaces where it goes now, where it's about like quantity and like the results. But it was very much like embedded into like, yeah, this idea of the process. And
Mm-hmm.
I think generally speaking, like in different levels, it used to be like a more common mindset of like the more ancient times, even, but also even in like the Middle Ages as well, where there was this idea of yeah, the process, or like kind of in a way the ritual of making the item, or like doing this particular thing, that was much more important than actually the goal. It's like, yes, because it's very much about like, yeah, I mean, goals are still important, but the thing is that um the entire journey itself, it's in the journey where the transformation lies. If we try to rush towards the goal, we miss the opportunity for transformation. And that's, I think, the lesson that that we can learn, like the core lesson I think we can learn from the Koryos, but also just from like the Middle Ages and these ancient cultures in general, that it's about the process and being intimately involved with what you do. And that transformation comes from that, and it can't be rushed. You can't like and I think that's one big thing regarding modernity. There's this idea of like these quick fixes, and we need to have it now, and like, but there's no transformation can really come from that. Like, it won't last. And it's true. It's actually, if you embrace the process, that you can actually yeah, where the transformation lies in, because it
Yeah.
puts you
Yeah.
in a entirely different mode of being.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so now you spend a lot of your time working with people in a community sort of centered around these ideas. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like yeah, we're just coming together kind of as individuals, and like-minded individuals coming together. And I'm just talking to people here and there in that way. And very much like, yeah, the focus for myself is very much the podcast and the course that I do to talk about these concepts. And it's kind of like my main focus. And then just try to, yeah, talk to people, like uplift them a bit, and then and listen to what they bring in, and let that shape the community. So it's kind of like it's like a shared carving. It's like we started off with this like a piece of marble, and like and I'm just uh I took out some chunks myself, and I'm listening, and like letting other people take out some chunks, and then we're seeing like what we're gonna reveal in the end.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's wonderful. Um, this has been really fun. I feel like I've learned a lot from you. Thank you for
Yes,
thank you for reaching out.
likewise.
And I'm maybe as we come to a close, anything else you'd like to say, or I'll definitely put a link to your podcast when I post this video, because
Thank you.
I've enjoyed I haven't watched nearly all of your videos, but I've really enjoyed what I have watched.
Thank you. I don't know. I guess the only, I don't know, like the biggest thing like that was kind of on my mind also just was, like I don't know, there must be a way, for both like Christianity, but also like people that live within the framework of modernity to incorporate these into in a way in their own way into it. This, and I think it's, I guess if I think about it, I guess it's more about like being intimately involved in the ritual itself, to not be someone who just I guess just observes the ritual, but to become part of the entire act itself. And I think that's where the I guess if you really distill it to its core, that's where the power lies. It's in that. And I think
Yeah.
that's, I guess yeah, I don't know what I would want to bring in for anyone listening. It's like, yeah, to figure that out for ourselves, like however that looks like. But I think yeah, we need to, I don't know, I guess rediscover the power of ritual in both like a non-Christian but also a Christian sense, and this shared um participatory kind of understanding that comes from this, like this shared act of doing this together in a way that's very intimate with the act that one does. However, like that exactly looks like in the mythological or religious context. But
Yeah. Yeah, and an openness towards, especially when
yeah,
there feel to be, rituals that are calling to you, a sense of openness and courage
yeah,
to explore. So, well, thank you. Thank you. This has been really lovely. Thank you for coming, Robin.
yes. Thank you for having me on.